I think sometimes we can look down on someone because they don't have your gift.
My geniuses is invention and discernment.
Hey, welcome to the Consultant and the Coach. I'm here with my good friend Josh.
Hey, Erik.
And today is all about your working genius. We got to take it apart. And is this right? Is it not right? What you originally gave as a C- to this book, we'll find out now that you've applied all of this to you, if it goes down to an F, or does it actually rise to a B, or maybe even an A? Because I've gone from an A- up to an A.
Oh,
so
have you?
I've even
Wow.
raised mine. But first, before we dial into your working genius, you came up with your own scripture based on your reflections. What did you choose and how come?
Yep. So looking at Lamentations 3:40, let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. And so I thought that was a good reminder. Obviously, the working genius by itself doesn't let us return to the Lord, but it is a tool for testing and examining our ways, thinking through where God has gifted us and helping us to be successful in work and life as a tool to help us along that journey.
So kind of the application is, just as Lamentations is telling us to test things, you likewise are testing, hey, is this stuff right? Is this stuff biblical? Are you right in how it applies to you? I like that reflection.
Yeah.
So you took Lencioni's Working Genius.
Yep.
Let's start off. What are your geniuses?
Sure. Well, in a little context I'm going to add just for folks who are listening. Remember way back, if you go back and find it, a few weeks before we did this book, before it even came out, we did the unboxing for you. So we've already done yours. And then this is the fourth in a series, kind of what we started launching when this book came out, trying to help kind of people think through it, either as they're buying it or choosing maybe whether they should or not. So this is now the back end of that, of basically the fifth time we're hitting on this. So just a little context if you're just jumping in. But anyhow, my geniuses, not surprising, I believe you predicted these, which was not a surprise either, but it's invention and discernment. And I would say, I think those are probably spot on just because I tend to work very closely with, in my consulting work, executives across the spectrum of very large health organizations, healthcare companies, large public health groups, large corporations, all the way down to entrepreneurs, but always at that C-suite level, helping them to effectively create solutions that either they haven't been able to create till now, or they just can't, they don't have the bandwidth or the expertise in-house to address. So
and knowing your ability to invent something is off the chart.
In some cases.
we'll go for a run. We're like, I'm just stuck on this thing, and we're going for a run. I just want to run. And you're like, I'm stuck on this problem. And then we're like, 2 days later, we'll go for a run. Hey, Erik, I figured it out.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Now, so those are your invention and discernment, according to the survey and what you've told me, are your geniuses. What are your working competencies?
Well, the other thing I'll say about discernment, which might speak to some of my frustrations, is people with discernment, at least I would say myself, is we have an ability, because this is actually what's interesting, combining invention with discernment. I have an ability to invent a solution, and I'm discerning enough that I can quickly determine that I have the right solution. So I'm both extremely effective and extremely efficient. And I think where this is helping me understand myself is one of the reasons why I have been exceedingly successful as a consultant, but was also highly frustrated, getting to that, in working jobs, is because I would be asked to work on projects, again, mostly strategy, innovation, just not in the right space, right? But I would figure stuff out, and I was discerning enough to sort of make decisions, and I'd look around and go, I've worked like 20 hours this week, and I've already done way more than my job. What is going on with this organization? It's so flippin' slow. Because, maybe we'll jump straight to my frustrations. According to this, I don't have the gift. I'm frustrated by galvanizing and enablement, which basically means that I just wish everyone else would get on board with the fact that I'm smart enough to have the answer, and if they would just listen to me, darn it, we'd already have made this decision, and all the politics and the nonsense and everybody taking hours and hours and weeks to come to the same conclusion is just driving me bonkers. And I'm partially making fun of myself here, by the way.
So your frustration is galvanizing and enablement.
And so it's said. So here's funny about that. So there's a few things we could probably talk about, but it said my competencies are wonder and tenacity. Which wonder I get. Like, you set me off in the woods by myself, and I can wonder all day long and do that to some degree, no problem. Tenacity was interesting to me. This gets back to the comment I didn't dig into in the last podcast about where you apply the working genius. Because when it comes to home projects...
Now, how do you apply it?
So when it comes to home projects, I am not tenacious. I hate finishing home projects. It drives me insane. In fact, I'm pretty certain my wife and I have these problems because we're both not tenacious. And we just finished a project after weeks and weeks and weeks. In fact, we skipped a Sunday night event we should have gone to because we were actually finally making progress. And we said, no, we got to skip this event and make this progress because we've been struggling for weeks to get this project done. So I'm not sure, but at the same time, there was a question in the assessment about liking to check off lists. And I love to check off lists. I like to know exactly what I'm supposed to complete. And I have a to-do list and I check stuff off through my day. So I at least know what I'm supposed to do. But that's work stuff. And this is where I think there might be a slight difference in how we apply working genius to our home life.
That's fascinating.
Versus our working life. And because there's certain things. Now, I could also, because I have to get stuff done for my job, I could have been, maybe by the time I get to my life projects, I'm so worn out from the completion part or the tenacious part of getting stuff done, I don't have any capacity left to do it. So maybe that's true. But I was surprised. I thought my competency would be in enablement. Definitely not a galvanizer. But I thought my competency would be in enablement, partially because actually just.
Do you think your enablement? You thought it would have been higher. I think it can look higher to certain people, but I think yours might look higher than it actually is because you're so good at invention and discernment. So you're so all over the board over here. It almost made enablement look higher than it actually is because you have those others so knocked out.
I just thought what enablement would have been the competency and tenacity would have been the frustration. And the reason I say that is, at least I understand enablement. You're really good at helping other people. And one of the things I enjoy about my consulting work is being able to enable my clients to be successful, whether it's preparing decks for them, pursuing projects for them.
This is what Lencioni said about enablement.
Okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
He says next, this is if you have the gift of enablement, next someone has the answer to answer that call to action, to make themselves available, to agree to do what is needed to get the solution off the ground and moving forward. So you're like, coach, put me in. That is enablement. I'm on board to help with that idea. Count me in with those values. I'd love to help with customers. Let me know when you need me. I'll drive to Monterey and I can take 6 people in my car. That is the gift of enablement. This is that person. Yeah, sign me up for that.
Well, and I would say that the reason I thought that was a competency, I didn't necessarily think it was a genius, was again, with my consulting work, I do enjoy a lot of effectively chief of staff role. So in fact, I just got an email from a CEO that I'm supporting right now, and she had said, hey, thanks for the call. Really appreciate the chance to just have a confidential conversation in terms of she was working in through her own mind, recognizing the CEO job is a very lonely job, right?
Yeah.
And she's new to that role, having been in C-suite roles, but not the CEO job. And basically what I did was create a safe space for her during our meeting to just informally, out loud, process a particular topic and decision that she was trying to articulate. Not even just make up her mind, but how to even talk about it in sort of a coherent way, right? And you can only do so much of that in your head. And I've had several interactions with CEOs over my career similar to that. And I actually really enjoy being a listener and a sounding board, giving us other perspectives. And with that, being able to have them say, hey, can you help me do this thing, right? And sort of help them implement their agenda, right? So I don't have to invent the agenda. I don't have to tell them it's the right agenda. But I do get some joy out of sort of saying, hey, You need someone to help you in your way. Like, you don't need someone in the particular...
But let me tell you what I just heard. What I
me.
heard you say is, will you help me with discernment? So this person just asked you, will you help me in an area that you are a genius?
Okay.
So I can see why you would like doing that. Granted,
so maybe it's more discerning than enablement.
Because, I mean, and this is where I love the part about working genius. Their cogs is the. It was actually Lencioni's wife that came up with the idea. They're cogs that fit together. But essentially, what he says is, yeah, they come together. But what I heard you say is, hey, Josh, will you help me figure this out, or will you help me invent this thing? And you're like, well, hell yeah, that sounds great. You just asked me to do what I love to do. Sign me up. Now, if I had to say, hey, Josh, we have a bake-off this weekend, and I need to make some cookies. Will you come to my house and bake cookies with me? You'd be like, no.
As long as we can talk about inventions and discernment.
And so I think that's where, I think the person who, enablement, they just sign me up for anything. I have 2 of these kids. They love it's actually one specifically. It is enablement. She wants to volunteer for everything. Honey, you cannot volunteer for everything. Granted, she is low on discernment.
Yeah.
So this is where they do come together. So that's what I heard when you said that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I guess I just think of the chief of staff role is enablement, because you're basically enabling someone else's agenda. Or when I work with entrepreneurs, enabling them to bring their ideas to life. But I think many ways what that actually entails is helping them refine and discern their inventions to bring to life more so than the actual enablement part. So maybe it is correct.
And this is where, with any personality test, if you put too many things, there's a mushy middle in between the gears.
Yeah.
And so now let's jump into your competencies. Your competencies, according to the test, are wonder and tenacity.
Yeah,
so
both ends, which was kind of funny too.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. So wonder, according to Lencioni, it's the first stage of work. Calls for someone to ask a big question, ponder the possibility of greater potential, raise a red flag, or simply speculate on the state of things. Is there a better way? Does anyone else feel this way? Or does anyone else feel that something's wrong? So that would be a competency to you. You're good at it.
Yeah, I can, and I like that one in terms of just competency, that language, because what it means is I can spend a little time and wonder. I can deal with people for a little time while they wonder, but not too long. Like, we can talk about it, and we can go, what if? But then sooner or later, we got to get to it. I mean, we got to start inventing the solution.
So I can live in wonder.
Yeah, I know you can.
And
that's why half the time I kind of go, hey, that's great, Eric, let's get to it.
But here's funny. My wife, it's a frustration.
Hates it, yeah.
Drives her nuts.
Yeah, I could see that.
And so this is where, last episode, going back to life application, we need to at least be aware, if this is an area of wonder for one person, area of frustration, I don't know if you guys want to live in that area, because you're going to be butting heads.
Yeah.
So this is where you need to be aware of those you're working with. Let's hang out over here in a genius and a competency, or not.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you how my wife has agreed to take the assessment. I haven't had her do it yet. But taking it for myself in this podcast, I'll tell you what I think she is and how it applies. I'm guessing she is a discerning enabler. That's my guess. And the way that's played out is I have learned over many years of marriage, and I will say many, many mistakes, because I'll play in that wonder category for a little while. I can do that. And I'll quickly come to an invention and get super excited about the invention, because it's, of course, absolutely right. Because I'm very discerning, and of course it is. And most of the time,
you are right, typically.
It's usually right theoretically. It's the application that's always the hard part, because people are involved, and I'm not a good Calvinizer.
That's so true.
It's the reality. In a vacuum, physics B, like working genius, my ideas are really good ones. But when it comes to people, they destroy it every time. But I would get so excited about things, and I would bring like these wondrous inventions to her. And she's a discerning enabler, and she'd be like, that doesn't work for all these reasons, and what are you talking about? And why are you trying to talk about moving our family across the country another time for some other thing, for some other place?
The funny thing is, as you say this, I know exactly what her face looks like.
Yeah.
Sure.
Trust me, so do I. And so it's even like to the point where I have figured out the way this works. Is a recent example. Is I can be very content with my current circumstances while wondering and inventing future circumstances. And this drives her insane because she thinks it means something's wrong with our current situation. Case in point, a house. We have lived in our current house for 2 years. It's a great place. We could spend 60 years there. We'd be fine, right? But what I've learned with her over time, and has so far applied well, is I have a very good friend, a friend of yours you introduced me to, good realtor, who is also, I think, very good at the wondering and inventing and helping people sort of imagine and work out their future life, right? Which is great. He's very good at that as a realtor. So I've learned with him, when I see a property that's interesting, I do not tell my wife, right? I do not even...
This is going to sound like a Dr. Seuss novel, really. I do not do this. I do not do that.
I keep my mouth shut. I do my research. I do my Zillow research. I look up the county records. I get feedback on the irrigation because we live in a rural area and with agriculture and irrigation from the river. I do my work on the idea. I work the invention. I do the discerning. I usually go see it. I have not even told her yet. I will tell her when I have a much more baked idea. So I don't tell her when I'm like using the KitchenAid. I don't tell her when I'm, putting the cookies in the oven. I've only done it once I've actually baked the cookies and have like something to taste test before I tell her that this is the recipe to open the cookie store, right? Like this. I haven't actually bought the house without her permission, not yet. I don't think I'll do that.
Please don't.
You could stop me. But I've learned, because she's a discerning enabler, is my guess, my working guess, is it drives her bonkers to spend time in the wondering and invention space. And so I will try to, understanding that, do a little wondering, do my best at inventing and discerning, and then bring her something that's a little bit more completed for her to actually then respond to.
I think you're spot on there. And let me give you a coaching perspective from what you just said. You're saying my working frustration's enablement. I get frustrated. This is not a gift of mine. I'm frustrated. You are married to someone who has the genius of enablement. I would be telling my wife, honey, you're a rock star here. I so appreciate you. I need you in this area of enablement because you are so good at it. I think sometimes we can look down on someone because they don't have your gift.
Yeah.
If anything, what makes a great work, or as we apply it to life or even church, we need all 6 geniuses.
Right.
And if we can learn to appreciate them even more.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you another good example. I always tell people in my consulting work, I don't hold back. I say, look, especially because I do a lot of healthcare work, I say, hey, my wife is my secret weapon.
Oh, yeah.
Like, not so secret weapon, because she's a nurse practitioner, which means, if you don't know what that is, someone who works and can actually prescribe. So on the prescribing half of the spectrum with docs, even though they in some states don't have all the same authority. But anyhow, they're not the order executors, they're the order givers. And the reason that's helpful is because so much of healthcare is sort of revolves around the pen of the prescriber.
It does.
And I can't tell you the number of times I have made much quicker breakthroughs on particular projects that had any impact on the provider workflow or provider perspective when I've taken it to her pretty early on and said, hey, here's an idea, just what do you think? This is the discerning part, right? And she can pretty quickly be like, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah. And she knows why it either will or why it will not
She can
work.
quickly get there.
Because healthcare is messy, as you know. You spend a lot of your time in healthcare because you have these, everyone comes into healthcare, I'll fix it.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Amazon's not huge into healthcare.
They just dropped out again.
They're going to come back in next week.
They bought a company, so they're just going to reapply that company. But
what happens is, you're right.
Yeah.
You don't have the gift of enablement. It's a frustration, but you have people around you who understands it. So you're using the working genius perfectly. Is it up from a C-?
No, it doesn't fully. It's for you. I'll give it a C.
Ooh.
For you.
So I'm so
it's like middle of the bell curve.
I graded it an A- week 1. I'm not only so up to an A. I'm going to go to my leadership team, and I think I'm going to drop to become certified in this. It's like $2,500. So if you're buy the book, guys. Just buy the book. But then you can also go to the table group and become certified on how to use this with teams.
I think someone could just listen to these podcasts. Don't need to buy the book.
Well, they could listen to the podcast. They could hire us too, and we'd totally do it for them, and we would take really good care of them, and we would increase productivity. For every $10 they would put into the consultant and the coach, we'll make them another 100. Because that's what we do.
But it wouldn't be the working genius. It'd be our
it's a tool in our toolbox. It's not going to fix everything.
It's a C-level tool, which I've got. I've got a good Phillips screwdriver. I've got a good flathead. I've got a good hammer. I've got a good working genius book. It's another tool.
Lencioni might show up at your house and
that's all right. I'd love to have coffee with Pat.
That would be fun.
That'd be great. We should have him on the podcast.
Oh, I'll ask him.
We got an agreement from another author to come on the podcast next year. So look for that.
That's going to be fun.
Sneak peek. We'll drop that later on. Fighter Pilot book coming out next year, but yep.
So now we're thinking, we've talked about your genius, your list of competencies and frustration, and I'm going to sit on it.
Okay.
For 4 to 6 weeks, and then I think I am going to go get the certification just to take it to the next level. And a good coach always needs to be working on themselves. So a part of this is not like, Erik is that. It's part of it is I'm always like, okay, what am I going to work on the next 6 months? And then I dive really deep into something.
You get really excited about things.
And then I'll get excited about something else. I have wonder, invention, tenacity is not the other. But hey,
we're going to keep surrounding you with tenacious people.
Well, that's why the podcast keeps going every single week.
It's because we surrounded ourselves with tenacious people, not us.
It's because we're smart. Oh, that is so true. That is so true. Well, I think this is a good time to kind of, at least today, you kind of shut the working genius up.
Yep.
For
we'll look forward to the next one.
And it's going to be a tool in our toolbox.
Yep.
Even though you gave it a C, it is a tool in your toolbox.
I'm a tough grader, though.
That's true. I'll have to say, hey, Josh, I want your top book of all time. Ooh, that'll be good.
We'll see.
Okay.
Surprise next book next week.
Absolutely. Or just what we're going to do to make our listeners have an even better work life, how they apply that to their marriage, their kids, life application, you name it. But in the meantime, hey, go to theconsultantwiththecoach.com. If you're listening to this on YouTube, do us a favor. Just thumbs up it, hit subscribe. That way it pushes out to more people. So hopefully we can bless more people as well, too. And as Josh says, why get certified when you could just listen to the podcast?
That's right.
I mean, really, it is right here.
I mean, we could charge $2,500 for the podcast.
Why not? Hey, if you guys just want to buy us coffee, just do that. Just send us gift cards.
That's right. We'll take those.
To Starbucks or a great coffee shop here in Yakima, Washington. But in the meantime, until next week, we look forward to having you. Thank you for listening to The Consultant and the Coach.
Take care, everybody.